Welcome to the 31st edition of our Cardano Developer Office Hours. I'm Darlisa, and I'm going to be your host for today. So I just have two quick updates before we start. So the first one is for who doesn't yet know, the Cardano Foundation is running a hackathon called Layer Up. So this is happening for the 3rd of November to the 11th. So you can join in person in Berlin, or you can do all the process online. So there will be two tracks. One that's Cardano General. So you can think about anything, any project that you have in mind that you want to bring it to life. Or you also can do about Masumi. So we are going to have help from the engineers from Blockspin, Cardano Foundation, Masumi, Mesh. And the complete full size price is $30,000. So make sure to subscribe until the 30th of October. And then the second thing is that our Cardano Academy is giving 100% discount voucher for the CBCA XLs. So if you would like to expand your knowledge with zero cost, that's also a great opportunity. So the link for that for both updates is on the chat, and the promo code as well is available there in case if you would like to go for the CBCA XL. And now let's dive into the main session. You're excited to welcome Mateusz, Florian, and Aldo to show how the Cardano Ballot blends on-chain and off-chain votes to enable transparent community decisions, and also our submitting vote. Without further ado, Matt, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Darlisa. So just a little bit about Cardano Ballot first. So it's a fully open source voting platform which supports Cardano and also carry-based wallets. So Viridian wallet, for instance, from the carry-based stack. It supports two types of voting. One is mimicking one person, one vote, as much as possible without going into KYC and these kind of processes. But also, using Cardano wallet or using stake-based voting, basically. So when you configure an event for stake-based voting, then it will be an other weighted voting session. So you can basically decide as an organizer what kind of event you want to run. What we don't have yet is something like quadratic voting or anything like that. That would be potentially another event type that could happen. It would be a combination of those two. You would have to authenticate yourself, and your weight would be reduced proportionally to the function. It supports regular on-chain commitments for the vote verification. So when you cast a vote, the vote doesn't end up on database, on chain, excuse me. It ends up in some sort of database. In our case, it's Postgres. And then the vote, then the commitment is created for it. So, and at regular time frames, basically, we are committing the proof for the votes that we have on chain. And you as a user, you can take basically a proof that you have voted and has been not tampered with. And then you can verify that vote. We support two types of verification. One is called embedded verification, and there is also external community verification possible. So there is an application which somebody in the community can host, which is connected directly to Cardano Layer 1, and in which case you as a user with your vote, you can verify against that application hosted by the community. At least it's possible. Embedded verification is just for simplification reasons and because in many cases this community hosting is not taking place. For many reasons, actually. People are busy with a lot of stuff. It requires some sort of coordination and so on and so forth, activity. But we also have an embedded verification where within the application itself, you can verify if the vote has not been tampered with, has been already fully committed, and so on and so forth. Cardano Ballot is a bring your own front-end solution, and that's how it has always been designed. It's not a white label solution. So you will have to fork a project if you want to adjust it towards your company or a project, and style it accordingly, accordingly to whatever the voting is all about. It allows organizers to configure events such that vote results are revealed after the voting ends. So it gives privacy of the voting without using any sophisticated cryptography. It's just simply the votes are private in a database, and after the reveal, they, depending on the organizer, depending on whether people want this or don't want this, because this is its own field of discussion, the votes can potentially be released and available on IPFS. We don't directly support, there's no way to configure at the moment an event that the votes will automatically become available at the end of the voting, if it's configurable, but it definitely would be some extension point that when the voting finishes, the application would, for instance, automatically send the votes to IPFS or IOGON or us or whatever, Arweave. But this process would have to be manually at the moment done if organizer agrees to that, and users, in fact, because some users don't want their votes to be published. The application is written in a GDPR-compliant way, and this is important for certain types of events. Because if you are a person within a certain category and we are registering an event, we cannot put on a blockchain your first name or surname, because otherwise this would violate the right to be forgotten. Of course, we could experiment with lawyers if it's possible to sign a document that it's not possible to be forgotten on the blockchain and I waive my rights. But we didn't do it like that. We did it such that we don't put PII information on chain, basically. Yeah. And we maintain the mapping of a person to a proposal, how it's called, in the application itself. We don't put it there, but you can disable it, in which case the full transparent data will be put on the blockchain. It's a configurable parameter when you create an event. Yeah. So that's if you don't have any PII information, you don't have to use it. PII stands for, I know not everybody might know this, personal identifiable information. We also open source Helm charts for mainnet deployment, but you also have a Docker Compose deployment if you're not using Kubernetes or anything like that. There is this small CLI tool that allows you to create on-chain events. At the moment, it's not there's no UI around it. It's a command line tool. It's definitely something that could be extended in the future, either via contributions or by us. Yeah, as I already mentioned, easy forkable and adjustable frontend via CSS, and it's a bit of a hybrid solution between Web 2 and Web 3 voting, because in a classical Web 3 application, you should actually authenticate every single interaction that is coming to a backend or to a frontend, however. Whereas we use a bit of a combination, and we use GWT tokens. So you log yourself in, you become like a session token for 30 minutes or something, and then every interaction with the backend must be authenticated over this token. But you don't have to keep re-authenticating yourself all the time on every operation that you do. The big benefit of this application is that it supports actually literally, we tested it even with 1 million votes, because they don't end up on a blockchain, these votes, but in database, we are just able to create these very large commitments or large Merkle trees. We are using Merkle trees for the commitment, and it can support quite a large amount of votes. Yeah. The repository is open source, is under MPL 2.0 license. Please have a look if you want to. It's written in Java, and frontend is written in frontend. Aldo will come to frontend maybe. There is a group of people from Intersect that decided to fork Cardano Ballot for CC elections, which stands for Constitutional Committee elections, and they are doing some heavy adjustments to it because they have different requirements. They have DREPs. It's slightly, it doesn't follow exactly the same model that Ballot has, so it would not be possible to integrate it into Cardano Ballot. So they forked it. And I looked actually on this project a couple of days ago, and they are still actively developing it. But don't know anything more about the status of it other than the fact that the work is commencing by them. So that's definitely amazing. And yeah, now handing over to Florian.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. That's the correct window. Yeah, I would like to first give a quick overview of the ballot application this year, how it looks this year, and the features that the front end provides before we then go into a deeper dive into the front end and the back end stack, and also the deployment stack. This it's a kind of simple application. So we have the event information here. It comes down to the styling as what he talked about. We have the leaderboard here where you can see how many votes have been casted right now and how the spread of the votes is. So how many percentage of votes, how much of the votes went into which category, and so on. A little bit of a user guide, how to use everything, and then the categories. I will, because I wanted to show how to also verify a wallet, but I already used my numbers, so I will just show with the new wallet how the verification step would look like, and then go to other wallets, just so you know. But yeah, we obviously you need to connect your wallet. So when you have a browser extension installed, we detect all of the browser extension wallet you have installed, and you can then choose. If I go here and disconnect again, you can see that you can connect one of the either Cardano wallets, browser extension wallets, and connect your wallet that way, or another kind of wallet that we support, as what he said, are Viridian wallets. You can have here some description how to set up your wallet and then how to connect the wallet, and then go ahead and vote using that. But this time I will go ahead with my internal wallet. Once the connection is established, then you need to verify your wallet, because we want to make sure that kind of one person, one vote philosophy. And that's why you need to kind of prove that only you can vote once, mostly. And for verification, we support with verifying with Discord and verifying using SMS. And let me quickly use my other wallet that's already verified. If you verify your wallet, you can see the blue check mark here, the top left, top right corner. And now we'll go ahead to the categories. And casting a vote is as simple as just clicking on whatever nominee you want to click on, and then click on vote. And after you have successfully voted, in this case, it's the vote that I previously casted, then you can view receipt and also do verification, as we said, you get that's like the already integrated verification that your vote is actually in the Merkle tree on chain and was therefore published. So yeah, that's a quick overview about of the application. And I will hand over to Aldo to talk more about the front end and front end stack and so on.
All right. So yeah, I will be talking about the front end. Now, I won't be getting into too much detail about the logic of the actual front end because my main work on the ballot this year has been to actually update the front end. And by update, I mean updating the design. The app is already quite mature, so I didn't need to make any changes to the actual logic of the application. As for the stack, it's a React Vite application that uses TypeScript, and it uses Material UI for styling and the component library. Initially, when I picked it up, I was wondering if I could rewrite this into a more modern framework that uses server components, but it is a very interaction heavy application, and that's most of the application. It doesn't have a lot of a lot of pages, and most of them are interactive. So it makes sense for it to use React and Vite, and also because of the um, lack of a backend setup on my end, I couldn't really go for that approach. But yeah, some other notable packages are the wallet connection, which handles basically every every part of the authentication. We also use React Fiber for the um, trophy that you can see on the landing page and the winner page. And also we're using Redux for state management for users, for voting and all that stuff. Yeah, and now I'm gonna go into some challenges that I faced with my redesign and some takeaways. It was interesting for me to to try to redesign the whole app without actually having a backend setup and basically only a Figma design given. I had to make sure I was only making non-destructive changes. And at every point, I would assume that the functionality worked. And since I was only making the smallest possible changes, I was trying to keep everything predictable so that I wouldn't break any of the flows in the application. So most importantly, I'd say it was the incremental restyling that I did. I didn't go into like huge waterfall sort of changes that could cause breakages in the app, so to say. So yeah, that was very important, going component by component and even like more granular changes when refactoring. Of course, um, refactoring everything in isolation like I did could become hard without a good understanding of the logic. Without really understanding the flow and what's supposed to happen, of course, it makes it a lot harder. So when we internally tested, um, I had to do like another run through the whole application once we had a backend setup. But fortunately, because because the app, I'd say, well structured, everything was quite well encapsulated, and there weren't any like weird dependencies between the components. I ended up with only having to do like very minor changes in the end, and also changes to the parts of the app that I couldn't reach, like um, voting receipts or things that you would only be able to reach once you actually put in a vote. Um, yeah, and that's about it for me. I'm gonna hand it over for the backend presentation to Mateusz, I believe.
Yeah, so for the backend, it's a microservice-based architecture, which I actually forgot to write here. We are using Java 21, long-term support, Spring Boot 3.3. We're using Waver for some things, like this little functional Java functional lists, functional like either you have a few these goodies there from functional stack. Applications are using different microservices generally, but I compiled the whole list. Cardano client library in Java. Then we're using also Lombok. Today, to program something in Java without Lombok is a bit difficult, although with AI it could be generated, I guess. But we open sourced and ported from Hydra implementation of Merkle trees, which also had an Aiken contract, but we actually never used that Aiken contract for anything practically. And I know also there have been other implementations by other people for the Aiken part, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But as a Merkle tree implementation in Java, that was definitely that's okay. It's just a port from Haskell, pretty much. There's a library which we wrote some time ago already, using in this project for CAP data signature parser, which handles a lot of various scenarios, including hardware wallets and protected, unprotected data, and in general, parsing, not signing, so able to reason about and extract the data, and of course verify if the signatures are correct, which is the most important thing. We're also using Java binding to Aiken in one of our microservices. We wrote a microservice which allowed you to do, using Hydra by a committee, to independently verify the votes and calculate them, and for that we needed to have Aiken. What else? There's a small utility class that we wrote already 2 years ago, which is called Cardano Conversions Library, which allows you to convert, for instance, from slot to time, from the beginning of an epoch to time, from the beginning of the epoch to slot, and various such utilities based on the protocol parameters. And we are using this as well. One of our components is using the YASI store toolkit, which effectively is like a data load on Cardano, on Java, Cardano Java, with incredible amount of various modules for UTXO, for metadata, for transactions, for Adapods, which is rewards, and so on and so forth. But we wrote our own processors, how they are called. Scrolls, for instance, they are called reducers. But we wrote our own processing logic, and it was necessary for the on-chain registration part, because when we register events on chain, and we obviously need to read those events and make sure they have not been tampered with, if the signatures are matching, and so on and so forth. So for that, we used the YASI store, Postgres database, to actually store the votes themselves. And the architecture of the application, or rather platform, looks like this. There's a website hosted on Vercel, and then you're coming to a CloudFront, and there is a load balancer then, and we have a few microservices behind the scenes. Actually, one microservice is missing here, but I'll come to that. Okay, that must have been a mistake. But the voting app is the one where you cast the votes. Then there is a verification app, which allows you to run by the committee of people independently from Cardano Foundation to verify the votes. We actually don't really deploy it in our infrastructure, because we use embedded verification, what I mentioned already before, from the voting app itself. And then you have a user verification service, which is necessary for this light KYC that we have for one person, one vote, either using Discord or SMS verification and or carry verification. Yeah, and for the user verification service, there's an integration with SNS, which is Amazon simple notification service. I believe this is the shortcut. We also have a Discord bot, small component, which is connected to our Discord. And in the back, you can see a vote commitment application, which basically periodically keeps reading the votes from the database and keeps sending them to Cardano mainnet, the commitments. I mean, the effectively root of the Merkle tree, which is responsible to hold the votes. Yeah, the component which must have been a mistake has been missed from here is a ledger follower application, and that one is connected to Cardano mainnet and is syncing events, effectively registration events from the Cardano itself for this application, but also is helping with the things like finality of the vote, because then we know. Of course, we could use another component for it to read how final the particular transaction is, but we want to give indication to a user that when he's doing the vote verification, that there won't be any what the probability of a rollback can be for a transaction and how final effectively their vote are. So after the commitment is done, then the vote becomes pretty much final. When a certain amount of time passes, so to speak. That's how it works on Cardano. Yeah. And that's it on the architecture.
Yeah, actually, there is a question from Roberto. Is SNS any good? I think that was for Marty. No?
It was just a joke, sorry.
Right. Thank you.
Is SNS any good? Okay. Well, no, probably. We wanted actually to use Twilio when we developed this 2 years ago, and it was already actually working, but we couldn't quite get the contractual aspect of that part in time. So we were forced to use Amazon SMS. So in a way, you could say that.
Maybe I can take the opportunity to respond to myself and explain why SNS is not that good. Yeah, so AWS has the different tiers and different ways to send SMS to different countries, different prices as well, and it's not very easy to cover the whole world. Like we have a US registered number under our Cardano Foundation organization, and it's one of the origins for SMS that works well for most countries, but it also has some issues to send to some others. Actually, to send to some countries, you need to register a phone number in that country, and they have different requirements. So it's very difficult to cover the whole world using SNS. I think with Twilio, for example, it will be easier because I think you will be sending SMS on their name, on their behalf, and they have all those deals with different countries, those registrations covered for themselves. So yeah, maybe Twilio will be a nice improvement next year if we can spend some time on switching providers. But yeah, it's long story short, SMS are tricky, expensive, might be expensive to send to some countries. We need to be very careful with those limits as well, to avoid spending thousands of dollars because of someone trying to spam our system. Florian this year put some rate limit into the SMS sending API endpoint, but still anybody can. It's a public permissionless endpoint, and anybody can try to register his phone number or fake phone numbers. So yeah, I didn't want to go into that much detail, but I think it's also interesting to share those details about the solution. Sorry, Mati.
No, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think also it's nice to explain why this is not a kind of a easy problem to solve, because yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I thought that maybe I also want to talk about the deployment and how from a tech stack and everything the deployment looks like, but also maybe give a little bit of an explanation how you can self-host or also host Ballot for event yourself, and which steps are involved and which decisions you might need to make. So yeah, first things first, we have, as Mateusz explained, we have a Docker Compose stack available, but also deployment scripts or Helm charts for Kubernetes-based deployments. The Docker Compose one is probably the one that most easiest to get started with. And it's also, I think, a pretty nice piece of documentation, because you can see in a very small, comparatively small file, which services we have and how the configuration for each service works, because it's mostly we are mostly using environment variables to configure stuff for those services. So you can have a look at the Docker Compose and then, as I said, see which services there are and how they interact with each other. And Kubernetes is more like the production grade deployment then, which we are also using for the production deployment, which offers obviously more features than a simple Docker Compose setup, but it's also harder to maintain and there are more moving pieces and so on. Yeah, with Docker Compose, you can find it in our Cardano Ballot repository. There are a bunch of Docker Composes. I tried to this year to compose all of the information and all of the Compose configuration into a single file, so it's easy to get started with. That's the one that I linked here. And obviously, all of the Ballot services are in there. The ones that Mateusz showed us in the architecture overview earlier. But also, like, some of the dependencies that we obviously need are in there for database of choices, PostgreSQL. So there's a PostgreSQL container spun up and configured. We're using Traffic as a load balancer or reverse proxy. We're not doing any load balancing here, but it's more like a reverse proxy. And Traffic's a pretty nice solution for a Docker Compose setup, because it allows for a pretty easy configuration right in the Docker Compose, how services are exposed to the outside and on which host and path and so on. Traffic's redirected to one service or the other. Yeah, and also because, as I said, most of the configuration is done using environment variables. We also have an environment variables template in there, so you can have a look at the environment variables that need to be filled out and yeah, to actually run Ballot. The Kubernetes deployment, as I said, are a bunch of Helm charts, a Helm chart for each Ballot service, basically, which you can use to deploy all of the services into a Kubernetes cluster. But obviously, there are some requirements for the Kubernetes cluster, which are not, which we are not describing or having in our Helm charts. For example, the ingress controller, because it's typically, you can choose from a bunch of ingress controllers, so most of them should work. But I think, as Roberto said, we have a rate limit, for example, implemented for the SMS endpoint, and that's like a traffic-specific configuration and wouldn't work with another ingress controller. But the ingress resources themselves are pretty vanilla, I think, so they should work with any ingress controller. The PostgreSQL deployment obviously needs to be there somehow, either in Kubernetes, inside of Kubernetes. There are a bunch of open source Helm charts or solutions for that already available you can just use. Or depending on where the Kubernetes runs, maybe there's also a managed solution around the corner that you can also use. But yeah. Maybe a little bit of details how the deployment stack looks like, what we are using currently. We have a Terraform Terragrunt infrastructure as code, as our infrastructure as code solution to deploy. These are only the main AWS services. As you know, there are a bunch of AWS services. So if you want to deploy something to AWS, you need to talk to 100 AWS servers. Feels like, but yeah, the most important ones are like CloudFront, Load Balancer, Elastic Kubernetes service for the managed Kubernetes service of AWS, RDS for the PostgreSQL database, and as we talked about, the simple notification service, which is a really complicated service because also the price structure or the pricing gets complex very quickly depending on where your origin phone number is and where you want to send SMS to and so on. So it's a bit challenging to work with that one. In terms of getting stuff into the Kubernetes cluster, we're using Argo CD. So the configuration or the deployment configs reside in a bunch of Git repositories, and Argo CD watches those repositories for changes, and as soon as it detects changes, it applies those changes to the Kubernetes cluster. And this is how all of the our services are getting deployed into there. But we covered those basically. Sorry, I need to go over them again. And UI is on Vercel, but we also so the UI is also on the GitHub repository, and we're also building containers for the UI. So it's also easy to deploy the UI into the Kubernetes cluster if you want to do that. And then, at the end, I like to talk about a little bit about what steps you need to do to then to create a voting event, basically. There are some prerequisites. So obviously you need a Cardano wallet with some amount of ADA in it, which is then used to create the event, and also for the vote commitment service, as we talked earlier, to commit or to put the Merkle tree in regular time intervals on chain. And because of that, the amount of ADA you need depends on how long the event is going to take. If you want to allow users to verify wallets using Discord, then you obviously need a Discord server and a Discord bot API token. And this token, we have a documentation up in the CF Discord wallet verification bot channel, not channel, GitHub repository. And there's a README which you can follow. The permission system of Discord is kind of hard, but I tried this year and I modified or updated the documentation a little bit. So if you follow that, it should be pretty easy to get the token with the correct permissions. If you want to use the SMS verification, then you need to have an IAM user which is allowed to send SMS or basically use the SNS service. And then we need an access key, secret key for that. And obviously a Linux environment with Docker or Kubernetes on it, which depending on how you want to deploy the services. Then obviously deploy using Docker Compose or Kubernetes. It's just a bullet point here. I guess you can argue that this is the most complex part, or maybe not, but I think it's not that much different to other deployments. If you work with Docker Compose or Kubernetes, it's like daily business, so I won't go into details here. And then, as we talked about, there's an admin CLI to actually creating the event. So you would choose what time that you want to start the event, how long the event's going to take, and when you want to present the winners of the voting. And then the admin CLI puts transactions on chain in which this event information is contained. And then the follower app, you need to configure the backend services in Ballot to listen to this event. Follower app basically would then pick up the event information, and backend knows, okay, now or we have an upcoming event, and then when the time slot of the time has come that the event has started, then everything is ready for voting basically, and the UI can show that the voting has started and users are able to vote actually. Yeah, and I think that's it from our side. We have a few more minutes for maybe questions. Are there any questions also to like the previous topics, backend or all the stuff first, deployment? I don't know.
Maybe it's worth to ask, so it's somehow recorded. What's the cost in ADA of running this? I think we have fresh numbers for this year.
Yeah, you can. Somebody can interrupt me and tell me that I'm talking, that I'm confused or whatever. But yeah, currently, because we have a transaction every half an hour, so it's like a configuration. It also depends on how frequently you want to do the vote commitment. But currently, we do that every half an hour. So we have like, if I'm doing my math right, 48 transactions per day. And that means, and each transaction currently costs, I had a look this morning, 0.21 ADA. And that would be like 10 ADA a day. Yeah. I think I did the math right.
Yeah, and it's worth to mention that you can lower those cycles or make them longer, so you can adjust the cost a bit. Those transactions are the proofs of the Merkle tree that it's used to aggregate all the votes. So it's there is no actual, let's say, recommended cycle. Is up to whoever to push those proofs more frequently or less frequently, depending on the amount of votes as well. Because so yeah, that's I would say not that expensive at current ADA price.
And you can push to 1 million of them, right? So that allows you, whereas otherwise it would be extremely expensive if you wanted to really put 1 million votes. But maybe what is worth to mention, not that there is a specific question, but for those watching, some of the challenges from architecture and from the general thing that I've encountered or we encountered, apart from just SMS problems. I would say that, first of all, it should not be seen that this is some sort of the only voting solution possible on Cardano. Yeah? There are different applications with different set of trade-offs that one can develop on the blockchain. So this has some trade-offs. We storing votes in a database, for instance, and depending how what organizer as a decision they make, they might reveal those votes when the voting finishes, or they might not reveal it. So in that sense, it could be considered the platform a bit of a trust me, bro. But we have a vote verification, obviously, but still the individual votes might not be released. And another thing was with Hydra. I mean, with this year we didn't really use Hydra, but a lot of problems that I see on the, at least, some problems that I see on the blockchain-based projects are related not to half of them is related to technology, and half of them is related to non-technological problems. So related to Hydra, our main challenge because Hydra Tally application is still there, was just not used for this yet, was that working with a global state on Cardano 2 years ago was more difficult, and effectively, if you want to prevent the situation that some operator will submit fake votes, for instance, and things like that, we don't have contingent UTXOs on Cardano, meaning that anybody can create an UTXO. We cannot verify this. I mean, there are some tricks, obviously, for it, and we have progressed quite a lot since 2 years with various tricks, some authentication tokens and things like that. But definitely, it's not like the simplest thing if you program it. So the challenge wasn't so much the Hydra itself, even though that was 2 years ago technology. I mean, we just had a release of Hydra 1.0. For our use case, Hydra was working actually quite smoothly. There were no big problems. The main challenges were ability to map the problem onto the UTXO ledger and make sure that there are no security loopholes with it. So that's why at the moment, if you go to the Hydra app repository from within this project, from within this platform, you will notice that we're making a disclaimer that it's a federated solution, meaning that those operators, if one of them is malicious, would be able to exploit the tally process, which of course is antithesis of the whole point. That's why you're doing a committee of people that they vote, so that they don't exploit it. But we couldn't quite get it over the finish line with the fully decentralized solution. So it's a federated solution. That was definitely challenging. And from the non-technical problems that are also challenging, and I think this is not just for us, it's for the whole world, is how do you find a committee of people that are willing to independently verify something? For instance, vote verification service. It's not difficult to technically run it. It's a Docker Compose. It's a very lightweight component, but somebody needs to be willing to do that. Maybe they want to get paid for it. Maybe they want to do it for free, but it's a non-technological problem. Effectively, it's an organizational problem. How do you do that? And I believe sometimes we are forgetting. When I say we, I mean the blockchain community. Sorry to be a bit philosophical, but we are forgetting basically about that there are some problems which are non-technical. They are social problems, effectively. Yeah, but they are also problems in a way.
That is 2 questions. So Lucas, if you would like to go first, and then there is a question from Mickey as well in the chat.
Hi guys, sorry I missed a bit of the presentation. I was curious about this presentation because it's really motivating to try to have voting mechanisms, not just on Ecclesia or something like that, but for some communities or projects like the SPO incentives group now to gather endorsement for some of their initiatives before putting in a governance action on chain. But I'm familiar with Kubernetes, with all the infrastructure you've been describing. I just find it a bit contrasting with what's being done, for example, in Bitcoin with Nostr distributed systems where anyone can run a Nostr relay. Nostr is signature based, so you can submit your post or zap someone or something like that. Do you have any plans to eventually start breaking down this infrastructure that you've outlined and built into something that's more similar to Nostr, where any SPO in Cardano could run an extra service, a bit like a Mithril signer, and that would contribute to this kind of Merkleization and gathering of the votes?
No, at the moment we don't have plans for it. We would have to take a look in the whole budgeting process for the next year. At the moment, we have some small ideas how to improve certain things here or there, but not of the magnitude that you have mentioned at the moment. Okay. As for SPOs, I mean, anybody can run these things, right? Just like, but we are not. Our plan originally was not to make it like a permanent infrastructure component, like Mithril, if you will, these types of things, right? I'm not familiar that with a Bitcoin ecosystem. As a hodler, yes, but not as a developer. Sorry, right? So I don't really know exactly all the things there. So I know they have a hashing-based voting with the soft fork. So the basics, of course, I know, but but exactly not familiar. It was not the plan to make it a permanent long-term infrastructure component. Yeah, also when the application was developed, it's very important to put things into perspective. There has been some other community voting tools available on Cardano, there still are. So our intention is certainly not to compete with them, it's just to provide an option. And that's why it's also not a white label solution, which I already mentioned. So no, I haven't heard of any plans at the moment for something like that. If there are some plans, they would go into things like when the voting finishes, making sure that the votes are released on IPFS, for instance, so they can introspect it, but not to make it as a permanent infrastructure component. But we don't stop any committee to start running this for whatever they want, for voting about this, voting about that. And also permanent infrastructure would go against the original goals of the project, actually, which was, sorry, but you opened this question, so I have to say that the original goals of the project was not to disrupt the community voting platforms completely. So at that time, and I don't know what is the current status, they were trying to monetize some of these activities, like Sunday Labs governance, or I can't remember all the platforms at the moment, apologies, but we didn't want to disrupt the businesses building on Cardano. Yeah, so if we would now make some sort of canonical way part of the SPO infrastructure, that would be against the original vision of the project in 2022 or 23 we started. This year we're just pimping and small improvements. We're not really like, we don't have an active Scrum team against that. We have completely other projects, we're just maintaining it for the moment. I hope I answered your question, at least to the best of my abilities, I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Any other question, maybe from you, Pedro?
Before we wrap up, because you're a little bit over time. So Miki was asking previously if the hashes are stored on chain, and if so, what metadata label is used, if it is registered on our on the infrastructure.
So we are using just simple metadata transactions, nothing fancy, yeah, it's just we are commenting the root of the Merkle tree on chain via one of the labels. I forgot now what was the label, ID or number. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but hopefully I did.
But it's not like designed like explorers could identify this is a ballot vote and then could do groupings of, like, let's say there's 10,000 of those transactions and they could put thousands to Summit 2025, 2024, 2020.
No,
they
cannot even do this, because what we are committing on layer one is just the hashes, a couple of hashes here and there. The votes never end up on chain.
No, not the vote. Yeah, I guess they won't. There's not much information.
That's actually the whole point of the project, was the idea that the votes are the secret.
Yeah.
Because maybe this is something that is worth, if this is still recorded, to mention. I personally believe that to make a voting project on Cardano, which would be fully layer one or layer two, like using Midgard or something, not Hydra, because Hydra has its own interesting aspects, but like a rollup or layer one right solution is actually very easy. We had even a project like that in Cardano a long time ago. It's super easy. Every vote goes on chain. You just have to be careful in the tally process. Do you want to count if somebody has multiple times cast the vote or not? It's very easy, generally speaking. The difficulty of this project is that it's a hybrid of an on-chain and off-chain voting solution, almost like an application level rollup. And the idea is to protect the secrecy of those votes. Whereas with an on-chain solution, obviously, the votes would be on-chain, fully visible, unless you use encryption. We can talk about that as well. And it would be expensive to do it on a larger scale, right? Like, let's say 1 million of votes or something, that would be prohibitively expensive. Because because each user would have to pay actually the cost. Yeah. On layer 2, it could be cheap, but yeah. So it's an important trade-off to keep in mind. Actually, this is one of the things I've been also thinking for the future, if we ever have time to work on this and make new features, bigger features, is that the votes could be encrypted. Yeah, okay, let's not go there because it would have to be a new presentation would have to be from the architecture.
The metadata number is not registered in SIP10, I think. Yeah?
Sorry, say again.
Metadata label is not registered in SIP10, I think.
Maybe we forgot to register it, but it's a simple pull request. We could do that. Yeah. Sorry.
But can we add some metadata, like not the actual vote, but let's say total number of votes in that particular 30 minutes time, right? For
Yeah,
which
yeah.
you are in. Those are there?
That is possible. But again, actually, no, it is not there at the moment, but it would be extremely easy to do this. And depending how the event is configured, I forgot actually to mention that, but when you configure the event, you have a various configuration parameter, and one of them is if the voting results should be available during the voting, effectively, during the session of voting, not the individual votes, just the aggregates, right? Just to be clear.
Yep.
And if that would be enabled, then I think we could as well put one additional integer or whatever the event is, or few integers. What is the current, what are the current results on chain? So I don't think we are doing this at the moment, but it's a trivial change, but only if the event is configured according to these criteria.
Then that could be interesting for Explorer, so that at least
At least like in the transaction meta, okay, your costs are going to go up slightly per transaction, but like put a unique identifier of so Summit 2025, and then the hash of the Merkle tree, and then the count of the number of votes, then at least there's some data there that can be analyzed, visualized by us, like in the Trust Me, like there's still a Trust Me aspect to it. But
I totally agree. It's a very good idea. I think the reason why it hasn't been done is because so far majority of the events that we've been running, they had a hidden results during the voting because we didn't want to influence the results or whatever the business decision was taken by Cardano Foundation organizers, right? I don't remember even myself, but for those events where the configuration parameter would be set to true, in other words, that the results can be revealed during the voting, it totally makes sense. Perfect. Very good idea, actually, also, in my opinion.
Well, my day's done, and thank you very much. And
I think all the questions have been answered, right? So just out of the time, I will just wrap up. Thank you, guys. I think you have covered from everything from backend, front change, design, architecture, deployment. So this was very insightful, it was a very nice walking through. So thank you very much for that. And just thank everyone also that has joined and asked questions. So thank you very much, everyone. And you have a great weekend. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.